Hello, everyone! Welcome to another virtual event with Mysterious Galaxy. I am Nick, the Director of Events and Digital Marketer for the store. Today, we have a wonderful debut author here with us with their debut novel, The Memory Index. Say hello, everyone, to Julian Vaca. Hello!
Hello!
How are you doing, Julian? Happy release week!
Thank you so much. It feels very unreal to be in this spot, and like I was telling you in the green room, to have the full circle moment of kicking off release week with Mysterious Galaxy when I did an event with you guys in person nearly 10 years ago. It just feels very special. So I'm really grateful to be here.
Oh, thank you. And I bet you it's definite full circle. Like, wow, all that long time ago. Now you're here.
Yeah, this is awesome.
Joining us in conversation, we have Francesca Flores. Hello, Francesca.
Hello. Hi, I'm so happy to be here and celebrating Julian's book. We have the beauty right here. It's gorgeous.
For those of you who may be joining us and haven't yet read up on Julian, he has been a creative writer for over a decade. He's a staff writer on PBS's Reconnecting Roots, a nationally broadcasted show that drew in millions of viewers over the first 2 seasons. And like I said, The Memory Index is his first novel. Conversation partner Francesca Flores is a writer, traveler, and linguist. And if anyone hasn't yet got their copy of Memory Index, don't worry, because you have a link below that'll take you to our website. Not only can you get the Memory Index, but you also will get a very snazzy signed bookplate from Julian. I think, yeah, there we go, focusing on that signature. And of course, you can't go without a bookmark. Don't be one of those people that folds pages. Please don't.
Don't do it.
And then you also notice... Yes. And you also notice on our website, you can also pre-order Francesca's upcoming novel, The Witch and the Vampire, which I got to say, that cover is so good. I love it.
Thank you. I'm in love with it. I keep staring at it.
It's great.
Thank you.
And it looks like some of you have already figured out the Ask a Question section. If anyone during the event has any questions they want to ask Julian or Francesca or both, because we love joint questions, please submit them below and they'll be answered later on. Hi, Tiffany. All right. I'm going to go ahead and disappear. I've gabbed enough, but I will see everyone at the end of the event.
Okay.
Thanks, Nick.
Thanks. Oh my God, Julian, I'm so excited for you. This is
such a great
release day. And yes, you did it. You have done it. You are here.
I just got to say, I'm really excited about this. And before we jump in, I just want to say how grateful I am for you in particular, because you were the first author that my editor. So for those of you watching that don't know, there's a really kind of an intimidating aspect to publishing a novel, where you have to go out and basically ask other authors to blurb your book. And as a debut author, that's it just feels that much more intimidating, because it feels like a cold email, like a cold call. And so, my editor and I made this wish list of authors that we thought, man, it would be so awesome if we could, get them to agree to blurb. And we kind of divided and conquered. And a few months later, I got this incredible email from my editor where she said, "You'll never believe who just blurbed The Memory Index." And then she sent your blurb, and I got chilled. I was so excited and just so I was so grateful. And it seriously, it made my week. I was so excited. And now we get your name. You probably can't see this, but her blurb is right there.
Vaguely. Yeah, there it is.
So cool. So
I loved reading your book. It was brilliant. It's like, it just reminds me of so many of my favorite epic books with characters you love and huge stakes and a really epic plot line. I loved it. So
thank you so much. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, no worries. So for those of us who don't know, can you maybe give us a bit of an overview of the Memory Index and tell us why you wanted to write this book?
Yeah, absolutely. So I started, with this story, always sort of having this fascination, this kind of wonder surrounding memories, and in particular, our identities as they are connected to our memories. And so early on, as I was imagining this world in the book, there was a question that was kind of like the North Star of the story. And it was, very simply, are we more than the sum of our memories? And so that first question was sort of me pulling at the yarn and just seeing like, okay, well, where can a story take me if, the characters are kind of, maybe in pursuit of answering that sort of question. And so that led to then this, horrifying possibility of, a plague-like phenomenon like memory killer, besieging the world. And then how would humanity rally to sort of confront something, as terrifying as rapid memory loss? And then I thought, man, a story like that kind of sort of doesn't work in the present day where smartphones are everywhere, technology is ubiquitous. So I was really fascinated by this idea of, well, what if rapid memory loss existed in a sort of analog world, where technology, it wasn't as advanced, obviously, as it is today. And, how would, a mid 80s world confront something like that? And so all that to say, those are sort of the big sort of backdrop, kind of elements of the story. But at the heart of it, we follow this 17-year-old Mexican-American girl named Freya Izquierdo. And at the start of the book, she's in pursuit of, trying to uncover the mystery of her father's untimely death. And by the way, I should say the world is broken into two buckets of people. So there's recollectors, and those are sort of the blessed individuals who can remember up to, 3/4 of their memories on their own. And then they use what's called artificial recall to sort of fill in the blanks. And then the other bucket of people are degenerates or degens, and they can only remember up to half of their memories, and they rely on artificial recall pretty heavily. So at the start of the novel, the Skynet of my book, Memory Frontier, they announced groundbreaking medical technology that's going to forever change mankind's battle with memory loss. But to trial the new technology, they lottery 500 random students from across the country and send them to a boarding school. And of course, once Freya arrives and starts to, make some new friends and starts to discover boarding school life, she quickly discovers that not everything is as it seems. So that's sort of the elevator pitch for the story.
Yeah, and I think you handled it all like so perfectly. That's so many different epic concepts and really like in-depth questions that you ask that people, don't really think of in real life. We don't think, what if this thing came and randomly took all of our memories one day? That's not something you really think about every day. So, and I think you tied it together so well with the characters who are so lovable. And they're also like these really young people living in this like, pretty horrible time, and they have to kind of navigate it and deal with the consequences of what was left to them. Basically, they're just kind of in the society and trucking through it.
Well,
and yeah, I think you handled it so well.
I really appreciate you saying that. Young people are very resilient, remarkably so. I think we've seen that, even in this pandemic, sort of reality that we've all lived in. And so I really wanted to try and capture, an ensemble story where, yes, you have the heroine, the protagonist, Freya, but then, Fletcher and Chase and Ollie, the other characters, are certainly heroes in their own right, and they're navigating their own, hero's journey. And so, but yeah, I really wanted to press into, young people having to navigate something like this because I'm just very inspired by young people.
Yeah, I think you did it so well. So this is your, debut with Trad Pub, but you've self-published before. Can you tell us a bit more about your journey to getting to this point, and just tell us about it?
Yeah, absolutely. So just very, very quickly, this is just sort of the Cliff's Notes. When I graduated from college, I had a BFA with a concentration in screenwriting, and I think in my head I'd always had this sort of this big dream of, this romantic dream of, going to Los Angeles and, selling a screenplay and, breaking into the film industry. And one of the things that I learned in college and sort of, in my, post-college, life is that really when you're trying to make a film, even if it's just a short film, you're relying on so many different moving pieces, so many variables. There's so many different roles that go into a production. And so I always kind of felt like antsy, like I had all these ideas, I wanted to get them on screen, but I couldn't obviously do everything on my own. And it wasn't until, a couple of years after I graduated from college that a dear friend of mine sent me a Brandon Sanderson book, Mistborn. It was the opener to the Mistborn trilogy. And I was sucked in. I loved it. And, I quickly found like, well, wait a minute, I can take my love for screenwriting and really sort of just transition that into the novel medium. And so I just quit my sales job that I had at the time, and just, took a part-time job at a bookstore and just focused on self-publishing. I felt like I had these stories that I really wanted to tell.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it was a really incredible season in my life where, I would grab my laptop and go to the local coffee shop, write for a couple of hours, and then, walk a couple of storefronts down and open up the bookshop and just get to meet people and, be a bookseller by day. It was an awesome season. And I should also say, like, it's not lost on me, how blessed I was, in that time to even be able to quit my sales job like that. Like, I know a lot of people aren't afforded that sort of luxury, and I know that kind of sounds entitled, but it's not lost on me that, I had a very supportive wife, and she was always pushing me to pursue my dreams. And so all that to say, I had that incredible season where I was, self-publishing, and I think it positioned me. It was almost like a writer's boot camp of sorts, where I learned the craft, and I was ingesting a lot of Brandon Sanderson YouTube videos. It was
I feel like, oh yeah, I was just gonna say, I feel like a lot of authors can relate to that. We all spend some time like working on our craft, whatever way that is. Like, I was just posting stuff online, and until I decided I was ready to try traditional publishing.
Yes. Yeah. And it's such a gratifying and sort of fulfilling, transition when you go from, dabbling into it as a sort of hobby and as a sort of pastime to now sort of, having a team in your corner and doing it the traditional route. There's really nothing quite like it. I know you can attest.
Yeah.
It's pretty special.
So you've self-pub before, and this is your debut. And it was originally planned as a trilogy, but now it's a duology. Can you tell us more about how you had to change your writing process to switch it?
Absolutely. So this was a very unique situation in that I sold the memory incept, on proposal. And so, for those of you listening that maybe aren't, aware of sort of the traditional process, usually you get a completed manuscript, and then your agent goes out and shops it. But I had a really unique path, and one thing led to another, and I had this proposal in front of an acquiring editor, and basically it was outlined as a trilogy. And they said, well, we really like the concept, we like your voice. But typically we have found that with, debut authors, trilogies are a hard sell. The interest sort of dips, from book one down to sort of book three. So then they said, would you consider doing this as a duology? And of course I was like, I would do it as a standalone. The fact that I'm even at the table having this conversation is a huge, huge honor. So, the process, the workflow, was pretty straightforward from that point on. It was just, taking the idea for 3 books and sort of reverse engineering it in a lot of ways, and figuring out ways to just kind of make it a cohesive story in two books. And I'm really curious to hear from you, because you wrote a duology and then you transitioned into Standalone, right? Is The Witch and the Vampire Standalone?
Oh, so this is, publishing stuff. But basically, I had a 3-book deal, and the first 2 were the duology, and the third is a standalone. So it's a
Okay.
completely separate story.
Right.
I originally was planning to write Diamond City as a trilogy, but then the same thing happened where I got, it was advised to write a duology instead. And I'm really happy I did, because writing a trilogy, you get your book deal about 2 years before the book comes out. So
Right.
with a trilogy, that's going to be like 5 or 6 years of your life.
Yes.
And it's difficult.
It is.
So I'm happy that it got turned into a duology, and I think it like summed up the story better. It was a lot more concise, but I'm also really happy that I get to have my standalone that comes out next year, The Witch and the Vampire.
Which, here's a plug, you guys can pre-order that today through Mysterious Galaxy. So make sure you do. The cover is insane. It's going to be so good. I cannot wait to get my hands on it.
Thank you so much. I'm excited for it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So speaking of other books, are there any other books or, movies or anything else that inspired you to write the Memory Index?
Yes. Great question. So I, from a young age, was, constantly consuming, movies and music. And I had a really interesting childhood, being first generation, Mexican American. You would think, a lot of the pop culture that I'd be consuming would be from Mexico or Mexican pop culture. But I actually got, a huge sort of smorgasbord of different things. I mean, I was watching everything from, Edward Scissorhands to, Eraserhead, David Lynch's Eraserhead, which I probably had no business watching as a young boy, but I love movies. I love story. Back to the Future is another one that comes to mind as being sort of this perfect seminal piece of work. And I really love. I think I said this earlier. I really love ensemble stories. Sandlot, The Goonies. I mean, even Harry Potter with Harry, Ron, and Hermione. That is very much an ensemble story.
Yeah.
So I was, even though I was born in '87 and was a child of the '90s, I was definitely consuming a lot of '80s pop
80s stuff.
culture. Yeah,
That's
yeah.
cool.
And one last thing I'll say too on that. So my dad collected laser discs. So he was convinced that they were the next big thing. And
I don't
for
even know what that is.
I was going to say, for those of you watching who don't know what laser discs are, they were kind of like the first iteration of DVDs and Blu-rays. So they were the size of vinyl records.
Cool.
They were massive, and the picture quality was incredible. And so
I feel like those would catch on now if you brought them back as like a vintage thing.
Right. I know, it's the kind of thing you would see like Target have they would have a kiosk.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's probably only a matter of time before those come back around. But so my dad we watched tons of laser discs, and one of the things that sticks out in my memory, in my memories, is watching a Michael Jackson like music video, but like it was almost kind of like I don't even really know how to experimental video. It was really interesting, but it was where Smooth Criminal came from. There's actually like an extended story to the Smooth Criminal music video, a before and an after. It's like a complete arc story. It's so interesting.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So
That's
anyway,
cool.
all that to say, lots of music videos were consumed, listening to lots of 80s music. So that was why including a playlist in the book was so important to me.
Yeah, I love that. And I love that you decided to write, like I knew it was set in 1987, but I didn't know it was like the year you were born. I think that's really cool to like really research deeply into that time where you were coming into the world and like write something out of it. That's so cool.
It was a lot of fun walking down memories.
Yeah, I bet. Yeah. And I love your whole like retro setup that you have there. It's great. It goes so well with the book.
Isn't that great? Shout out to my friend Chris
for
providing this space.
It's great. So for people who read the Memory Index next, hopefully everybody here is gonna get a copy and read it. What do you hope those readers take away from your beautiful book?
I think I would love it if readers, had moments of introspection and just really thinking about their own childhood and their own journey. I think, memories, they're and it's really the exercise of recalling memories is a unique thing. It's kind of like a gift that I think we take for granted. It's how we preserve our history. It's how we preserve our heritage. I was thinking about, one aspect of my life, where memories are very, very important. And it's that, so my parents made the decision when we were growing up to only teach us English. And so we're not, me and my sisters, we're not bilingual. We spoke English exclusively. And so there was always a language barrier between us and our grandparents. And so one of the ways that I got to learn about my grandparents' story and their history was through oral storytelling from my mom and my dad. And so interestingly, there's this sort of idea of, oral storytelling kind of being like memory preservation in a lot of ways. And so that's a long-winded, response to your question. But I think to distill it down, I would love for people to have moments of reflecting on their own lives and just sitting with the importance of recalling our memories.
Oh, I love that so much. And I feel like I definitely got that feeling from your book, not just the memories, but like when you mentioned earlier, like about like remembering when you were really young and like seeing like what's going on in the world and like just trying to like make sense of it all. And also like going from a child to, teenager, adult, and like looking back and seeing what you remember and how your life, like certain events in your life impacted you while you were growing up. It's very much like themes of life that everyone can relate to. And I think you did it very well.
Thank you so much. That was definitely the intention.
Yeah, you did great. So the sequel and the final book in your duology, The Recall Paradox, comes out next year. Can you tell us what else you're working on in the meantime and just let us know what's going on with you?
Yeah. So I'm in a really interesting spot right now where it's like I'm wearing two hats. I'm working on publicity and marketing for the Memory Index, which, pubbed a couple of days ago and, or yesterday, a couple of days ago. Yesterday, literally hours ago.
What is time?
What is time? But I'm also wearing this hat of, going through, edits and sub-edits on the Recall Paradox at the same time. It's just the way the deadlines worked out.
Yeah.
And so it's been really interesting talking about the Memory Index on podcast interviews or, written interviews for magazines, but then at the same time working, very hard on the sequel. And so I already got my edit letter back from my editor. And so it's been really cool, like shoring up elements of the story in the sequel with the first book finally out there in the wild. And like I had this really cool moment earlier this week where I was like fine tuning a big reveal in book 2 that's alluded to in like the first or second chapter of book 1. And I think that was like, that was a real, that was, I don't know if you experienced that with your duology.
Similar things. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a very fun, you almost kind of feel like an evil genius. But at the, there's obviously insecurities baked into that too, because, I was sharing with a friend earlier, sometimes I worry that like the twists are so obvious, that, people are going to see it a mile away. But I just know that that's because as the writer, it's very clear to us, the story trajectory.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You'll be fine. It will be great.
yeah, I know. I that's definitely the inner editor in me who's, causing me to have panic attacks.
Definitely. So speaking of craft and, writing characters and stuff, this is a question that I always like to ask in panels. I like to ask, which character do you think you would be friends with in real life? And what do you think you would do with them if you were hanging out together?
That is such a good question. There's a character in the book. His name is Chase Hall, and he provides a lot of the comic relief. And there was a lot of me in Chase's character because humor and being the sort of class clown was always a defense mechanism for myself. I deal with a lot of insecurities, and I definitely, dealt with microaggression and racism, and definitely dealt with bullying in middle school and even into high school. And so being the goofy sort of center of attention was my way of sort of flipping the script and taking control of that, because ultimately it's all about, wanting and seeking control. And so anyway, I definitely infused a lot of that into Chase, and Chase, I think, has a beautiful arc in that's fully realized in book 2, where we get to sort of peek behind the curtain and see, some of the things that make, Chase tick. But Chase is an aspiring actor. I love being goofy in front of the camera. And so that was another thing. He's very laid back. And again, the comic relief. I would definitely say Chase. Yeah. He doesn't take
I can see it. Yeah. Thank you for answering that. That's like my favorite question to ask authors.
I love that.
Yeah. Well, now I'm going to take a look. We have several audience questions, and I'm going to open those up.
Hey guys, thanks for joining us.
Hi. So I see one from Jeremy. It says, Julian, did you start writing with the ending in mind, or was that something that came together over time?
That's a great question. So I had a general idea of what the big twist was going to be at the end of book 2 that put everything that happens in book 1 into perspective. But the cool thing about, writing a duology back to back is that in a lot of ways you kind of treat it like one big story. And so I don't know, what your process is like, Francesca, but for me, I have this kind of stream of consciousness notes app on my iPhone that I use sort of in lieu of a traditional outline where I just dump all my ideas in. And so to answer Jeremy's question, while I had a general idea of what the big rug pull moment was going to be in book 2, it definitely evolved and sort of took shape as I refined the story and continue to refine book 2.
Yeah, for sure. I don't have a notes app, but for my Witch and the Vampire book specifically, I just got a little notebook, and like you said, I just wrote down everything that came to mind. And I really liked that way of drafting. I might do it again for a future book.
This is just what I found. If you focus too much on outlining, it can rob you of the joy of actually writing prose and writing story. So I definitely subscribe to the discovery writing approach of writing.
Yeah. All right. So the next question, let's see. What part of the book was the most challenging to write?
Yeah, great question. Okay, so I'll share this real quick. And I don't know if you know this. When I wrote the very first draft of the memory index, Freya was actually Black. And I thought for the longest time, like, okay, I want to write in this voice. I think it would be a cool opportunity for me to, exercise representation, all this stuff. And then my editor flagged it and said, well, let's have a sensitivity reader check it out. And I'm so glad she did, because she was able to identify all kinds of problems with that draft, and just all kinds of things that I missed. And then I had this like realization moment where it was like this mirror moment where you're looking in the mirror and it clicks, and it's like, wait a minute, I'm Mexican American. I have an opportunity to speak to my own story and to speak to my own heritage, and I'm forcing something here. Like, what am I doing? And And so while that wasn't necessarily the most difficult thing, I think it was definitely the most pivotal thing, that realization, and like really just kind of revisiting the story and completely revisiting Freya. And now I'm pleased to report that Freya actually navigates things in the story that I actually navigated as a teen. Just really small, subtle, instances and conversations and dialogue, stuff that I actually experienced. And I think it's a pleasure and an honor to be able to speak to that with some authority and some credibility, So.
Yeah, I know what you mean. It's like, it's a hard thing to kind of grow into as a writer when you grew up not really reading books with like Latinx characters or, whatever your identity is.
Yeah.
And then being like, wait, oh, I can write that.
Yes.
And it's, you got to give yourself permission at first. And then there's just, navigating that process without really having many predecessors who've written the same, especially in books that are like sci-fi or fantasy.
Yes.
So it's definitely a journey that a lot of authors go on, I think.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. And it's one I'm glad I took, for sure.
Yeah. So the next question from an audience member, I see, Julian, what made you want to set the book in the 80s? Did you imagine the story in that era from the start, or did it evolve?
Yeah, so I think the two things come to mind. First is I love a good atmospheric setting in a book, and I think when you set a story in the 80s, there's this immediate sense of familiarity, for the reader, where it's like, oh, okay, I can see the landscape. I can see how you're, dressing the set. I can hear the music. It feels atmospheric, and so if you do it well, it can ground your story, and again in that sense of familiarity.
For sure.
And so that was definitely one reason why I wanted to set it in 1987. But the other reason is, and I mentioned this earlier, and it was probably the biggest driving force behind the decision. I really wanted society to have to confront something scary like this with analog technology, with tape decks, with Walkman, with VHS camcorders, and I wanted to imagine the challenges that society would have to sort of navigate and confront without all of the advanced technology that we're afforded today.
Yeah, I think that's so unique. I think it's kind of like, it kind of has dystopian feel at times, but set in the past, so it's a lot different.
Yeah, definitely.
I think you did it really well with the atmosphere.
Thank you. Yeah, that was a great question.
Okay, so the next audience member question I see is for both of us. It says, what was the genesis moment for your books? So I assume that's like the beginning of your book, like what gave you the first inspiration?
I feel like I've been rambling so much. Do you want to go first, Francesca? And I assume they're talking about.
Oh, sure.
I assume they're asking about your forthcoming book, The Witch and the Vampire.
Yeah, let's talk about that one. So The Witch and the Vampire, I've always loved vampire stuff. I started the first book that I tried to write when I was 14 was a vampire book, and then I tried to write like maybe 4 or 5 more in high school. That was the Twilight Vampire Diaries era, so I was really going for it. But and I also wrote some fan fiction around the same time, but vampires are what I was hooked on. And so then a couple of years ago, I saw a lot of people in the publishing industry talking about wanting vampires to come back, and I was like, I can do that.
My time has come.
It's my time. And so I revisited a lot of other projects that I had either written and then shelved, or I only wrote a few chapters for and couldn't really get beyond that. And so I actually had like 4-ish ideas. 2 of them were originally vampire books, and then the other 2 were not. They were like other fantasy novels. And I combined lots of my favorite aspects from each of those and put them together. And I think it came up with a really unique concept.
Awesome. I love that. So for me, specifically with the memory index, I wish I had the sun piercing through the clouds moment where you're just struck by inspiration from above. But with the memory index, it's a little bit of a different story. It really came from, the discipline of writing. And here's a little bit of context. When I was, in talks with my publisher, I initially pitched a previously self-published book. And they said, we like your writing, we like your voice, but we're not really keen on, publishing something that's already been released. What else do you have? And so that set me then on the sort of exercise of going back through old story ideas, kind of fleshing those out. And I think, I don't know if this resonates with you, but as writers, we're not always afforded the luxury of only writing when inspiration strikes. We have to, often we have to take, our story and our writing workflow and turn it into a sort of discipline. And so I know that's kind of a weird answer, but I think for me, the memory index kind of came out of that sort of discipline of just needing to sit at the computer every day and just, hack away at different ideas until finally you find the one that feels promising.
Yeah, and then you can really go full steam ahead with it. Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you. That was a great answer. Let me see. So there's a few more. So I want to ask this one. Which do you think is more dangerous, forgetting or misremembering?
That feels like a plant. That feels like a plant, only because that's a question that I tease in book 1 that's explored in book 2. That really feels like a plant. I feel like that might have been a
It was asked by the bookstore.
Oh, wow. Oh, okay. Nicely done, Nick. Nicely done. I think misremembering has a little bit more of not dangerous, scarier implications maybe. Because if you forget something altogether, you're none the wiser. But when you start to misremember something, you start to second guess, facts and parsing out facts. Yeah. So I would say misremembering. And what about you, Francesca? Not to put it back on you, but what's more terrifying?
Yeah, I would agree with that, because that can lead to so many, mishaps in life if you misremember things. I definitely agree with that.
Yeah. I'm sticking with that answer.
Yeah. All right. And then another question from the bookstore is, what was your research like for the memory index?
Yeah. So, with something like this where you're dealing with, how the brain stores memories and, all the different, types of memories that we store. There was a lot of, lots of rabbit holes, rabbit trails, whatever the expression is, with medical blogs and articles online and just, gosh, we're, as writers working in 2022, we're so lucky, Francesca, that we can just Google so much. And so for me, I just can't imagine having to go to the library and checking out tomes and having to go.
Yeah.
We're pretty spoiled. But for me,
for sure.
Yeah. So a lot of the research was typing in interesting questions into, my search bar, collecting different medical blogs, different articles, and really just highlighting the sort of the big takeaways and the interesting pieces. There was one really fascinating thing that I discovered. There was a psychiatrist, and this actually worked its way into the book, who posited that that dreams that we have that are really kind of intense in nature, not necessarily nightmares or nightmarish dreams, but dreams that are kind of intense, are actually a training ground of sorts to prepare us for navigating different things when we're conscious, when we're not in REM sleep. And so I thought that was just a really interesting theory. So
makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And there's this craft book I read a while ago. It was by Lisa Crone, but I'm struggling to remember the name of the book, but it was by Lisa Crone. And something she talked about was how stories are inherently, over the thousands of years, are ways to teach us about survival, like how to navigate the world and like difficult scenarios, like you just said, with these intense dreams, that we use stories to learn like how to do life, basically. And so I think that ties together really well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And then we have one more question. It says, were there any scenes or little bits of research that got cut in later, or, you know, during your drafting period that you wish had stayed?
Yes. Oh, that's a good question. I had a huge
Yeah, it is.
I had a huge subplot in book 1 that we scrapped because because there's so much of, you know, explaining that is required to set the stage for the technology, artificial recall, me readers, and then I won't give away the big reveal in the third act, but there's a lot of dare I say, Christopher Nolan-esque, you know, exposition that's required.
Yeah.
Because of that, we had to scrap a subplot where, and it was one that I was so excited about, but I'm so glad. Maybe I'll, you know, release it as a deleted scene on my blog or something. But so Ava Marie, one of the girls, the kind of bully in the book, she pranks Ollie and Freya, and it just gets under their skin. And so there's this whole subplot where the foursome brainstorms and comes up with a revenge plot to prank her back. And so
that sounds so fun.
it was very like, look, I'll just say it. Part of the inspiration for that was the Lindsay Lohan Parent Trap that came out.
Oh.
There's a bunch of great like prank sequences in the first act of that movie. I have a special place in my heart for the Lindsay Lohan Parent Trap. But anyway, I really want it. And you know, think about any camp, you know, movie or show. There's lore. So I wanted to include that, and it didn't end up making the cut, but I think the book's better off for it.
For sure. Yeah, I know what you mean. There's always stuff you got to cut, and it does make the book better, but you still have a soft spot in your heart for those parts.
It's why they call it, a lot of people will refer to that as, you know, sort of killing your darlings, you know.
Yeah.
Kind of have to, you know, part ways with certain things, but that was a great question.
Sure. Yeah. For me, it's always like the little conversations between characters that I think help deepen their, you know, relationship and stuff. But I already have those parts in the book. I don't need one more. So one's got to go, you know, stuff like that.
Oh, gosh. I so agree. One of the things that I do when I go back and reread drafts is I ask myself the tough question, okay, but is this dialogue progressing the plot? Is it moving the plot? You know, I feel like that's
you got to answer honestly. It's like
exactly.
You're like, I think it is.
Yeah.
No, it's not.
Yeah, I know. You could do gymnastics to make a case for it, but is it really? Yeah.
Yeah, it's not. All right. Well, I had one final question before we wrap things up, but it was just, what was your favorite character to write?
Oh. Separate from which character would I like to hang out with and who I identify with, which is I'm going to say
POV character.
Yeah. Well, we don't get his POV in the book, but he's definitely a pretty big character. The dean of the boarding school, because he's such a conflicted and at times shadowy character in the book. Hopefully readers think they've made up their mind about him on page 150, only to have those, you know, only to have their expectations completely flipped on their head on page like 300. You know what I mean? Like, it's that character where you think you have them figured out, and then they surprise you, and then gosh darn it, they surprise you a third time, and you're like, but I thought you were, you know, those are always the most fun characters to write. The complicated, complex characters who keep readers guessing.
Yeah, it makes you want to write them like on their own, like give them their own little spin-off if you could.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Great question.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it was really nice to like talk to you today and learn more about the memory index and share that with the viewers.
Yeah, I'm so grateful.
No.
Francesca, again, I can't tell you how grateful I am, for you reading that early version of the book and blurbing it. And reading is such an investment of people's time. And so the fact that you did I'm so humbled.
Of course. I had a great time reading it. And I felt honored to be chosen.
Well, thank you. And thank you, Nick. I appreciate you putting all this together for us.
No, absolutely. Thank you so much for making this happen and reaching out to us saying, hey, by the way, my book's finally coming out.
Let's do something.
Francesca, thank you so much for being here and being a wonderful conversation partner.
Thank you.
Remember out there, everyone, if you haven't gotten your own copy of the Memory Index yet, what are you waiting for? You can definitely do that. We have a wonderful display at the front of our store with them. But if you notice below, there's also a link that'll take you to our website. Not only can you get the Memory Index and also get a very nice signed book plate from Julian, but you can also pre-order The Witch and the Vampire by Francesca Flores, coming out in March of next year.
The book is textured. Don't you want that?
Yeah.
That was a nice surprise.
Texture.
I had no idea.
You want that?
Yes, you want the texture, folks. You want the deckled edge. You want the deckled edges.
ASMR.
What got me was the deckled edging for sure.
Yeah.
And I love every rare customer that will go, I think there's something wrong with this book. I think there's a misprint.
That's funny. That's so funny.
Like,
yeah.
Actually.
Yeah. Here's the thing.
Yeah.
Thank you again, everyone, for being here and being a part of this fun event. I hope you all have a great evening, morning, day, whatever your time you're watching this at. See you the next one.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Guys.